The mining laser cut through the asteroid's outer shell like a hot knife through butter, sending clouds of metallic dust spiraling into the void. Engineer Sarah Chen adjusted her helmet's display, squinting at the readouts as her crew worked to extract the rare Earth metals from asteroid designation TX-7749. Depth scan shows we're almost through the primary layer, called out Jenkins from the control station. Should hit the mineral deposits in another few meters. Sarah nodded, watching the laser's progress on her tablet. This was supposed to be a routine mining operation, one of hundreds she'd overseen in her 15 years with Terra Mining Corporation. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was littered with these rocky treasures, each one containing enough rare metals to fund a small colony. But something felt different about this one. The laser suddenly stopped, its cutting beam flickering out as alarms began to chirp across the mining platform's control panels. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, floating over to Jenkins' station. "The laser's hitting some kind of resistance," Jenkins replied, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "It's not rock or metal. The readings are strange." Sarah frowned, calling up the deep scan data on her personal display. The asteroid was roughly 2 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide, typical for this region. But buried deep in its core, the scanners had detected something that didn't match any known mineral composition. "Could be a crashed ship," suggested Martinez, the team's geologist. "We've found plenty of those out here. Ancient alien tech, probably worthless after floating in space for who knows how long." But as Sarah studied the readings more carefully, her breath caught in her throat. The object wasn't ship-shaped, it was organic, massive, and according to the bioscanners, it was still alive. "Everyone stop what you're doing," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Martinez, I need you to run a full spectral analysis on that object. Jenkins, power down all mining equipment. We're not cutting into anything until we know what we're dealing with." The crew exchanged puzzled glances, but they followed orders. Sarah had earned their respect through years of successful operations and a perfect safety record. If she was concerned, they were concerned. 20 minutes later, Martinez looked up from his console, his face pale. "Sarah, you need to see this." The holographic display showed a three-dimensional image of the object buried in the asteroid's heart. It was enormous, nearly 50 meters long, with a serpentine body covered in what appeared to be scales. 4 powerful limbs ended in clawed appendages, and a massive head featured a elongated skull filled with teeth. Wings, folded tight against its body, suggested it had once been capable of flight. "It's a dragon," whispered Jenkins. "A real, honest-to-God space dragon." Sarah's mind raced. In all of humanity's expansion into space, they'd encountered dozens of alien species. Most were peaceful traders or scientists. A few had been hostile, leading to brief conflicts that humanity had somehow managed to survive. But nothing like this had ever been found. "The bio-readings suggest it's been in some kind of hibernation or stasis," Martinez continued. "But there are signs of massive trauma. Look at these damage patterns." The display highlighted areas across the creature's body where metal projectiles or perhaps energy weapons had torn through scales and flesh. Burns scarred its hide, and one wing appeared to be nearly severed. "How old?" Sarah asked. "Carbon dating on the asteroid suggests it's been traveling through space for approximately 2,000 years. Martinez replied. "Whatever hurt this thing happened a long time ago." Sarah stared at the image, her engineer's mind already working. The creature's injuries were severe, but not necessarily fatal, not if someone knew how to treat them. And the bio-readings suggested that whatever biological processes kept it alive were still functioning. Just barely. "We need to contact Terra Command," Jenkins said. "This is way above our pay grade." But Sarah was studying the creature's anatomy more closely. Her years of engineering experience, combined with the xenobiology courses she'd taken in college, were painting a clearer picture. The damage patterns weren't random. They were strategic, targeting specific vulnerable points that would disable but not immediately kill. This wasn't a battle, she realized aloud. This was a hunt. Something very powerful and very organized took this creature down. "What do you mean?" Martinez asked. Sarah highlighted the damage patterns on her display. "Look at the precision. These wounds were designed to cripple and capture, not kill. Someone wanted this dragon alive." A chill ran through the cabin as the implications sank in. If something had been powerful enough to hunt and capture a creature of this size and apparent ferocity, what did that say about the galaxy they were exploring? But it got away somehow, Jenkins observed, studying the readings. Ended up here, encased in rock and metal. Sarah nodded. But her attention was drawn to something else, the faint energy readings coming from within the creature's body. There were artificial components mixed with the organic ones, technology that she didn't recognize, but could perhaps understand. I want to extract it, she announced. The cabin fell silent. Sarah, that's insane, Martinez protested. We don't know what we're dealing with. This thing could be dangerous. It could wake up and eat us all. Or it could die while we wait for Terra Command to send a research team, Sarah countered. Look at these bio readings. Its life signs are failing. Whatever's keeping it alive won't last much longer. She turned to face her crew. I've spent my entire career fixing things that other people said couldn't be fixed. Fusion reactors, quantum computers, alien life support systems. This is just another engineering problem. It's a 50-meter space dragon, Jenkins exclaimed. Sarah smiled grimly. Exactly. And it's hurt. It needs help. If there's one thing humanity has always been good at, it's fixing the impossible. The crew looked at each other, then back at their captain. They'd followed Sarah Chen through asteroid fields and cosmic storms. They'd trusted her judgment when it came to billion-credit equipment and their own lives. If she said she could fix a space dragon, maybe she could. What do you need? Martinez asked finally. Sarah was already calling up schematics on her display, her mind racing with possibilities. The creature's biology was unlike anything she'd seen, but the principles of trauma medicine were universal. And if there really was technology integrated into its body, her engineering expertise might be exactly what was needed. First, we extract it carefully. No mining lasers, no explosives. We'll use the microcutters to carve away the asteroid piece by piece. Then we get it to the medical bay and start working. As her crew began preparations, Sarah found herself staring at the dragon's image. 2,000 years ago, something had tried to capture this magnificent creature. They'd failed, but just barely. Now, against all odds, it had found its way to her. She was about to find out if humanity's reputation for stubborn determination was more than just propaganda. The extraction took 18 hours. Sarah's crew worked in shifts, using precision laser cutters to carefully carve away layers of asteroid rock and metal that had accumulated around the dragon over 2 millennia. Each cut had to be perfect, too shallow, and they'd never reach the creature. Too deep, and they risked causing more damage to its already wounded body. When they finally lifted the dragon free and transferred it to the mining platform's cargo bay, Sarah got her first close look at the magnificent beast. Even unconscious and grievously wounded, it was breathtaking. Its scales shimmered with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with its faint heartbeat. The head was massive, easily the size of a ground car, with intelligent features that suggested this was no mere animal. Bio readings are getting weaker, Martinez reported, from the medical scanner array they'd hastily assembled. Whatever's keeping it alive is failing fast. Sarah knelt beside the dragon's head, running her hands over the smooth scales. They were warm to the touch, despite the creature having floated in the cold of space for centuries. Her scanner beeped as it detected the artificial components she'd seen earlier, microscopic machines woven throughout the dragon's nervous system. Nanobots, she breathed. Someone installed a life support system inside its body. Jenkins peered over her shoulder at the readouts. You mean someone was trying to keep it alive? Or trying to control it? Sarah replied grimly. She'd seen similar technology before, though never this sophisticated. The nanobots were maintaining minimal brain function and organ activity, essentially keeping the dragon in a medical coma. But they were failing after 2,000 years of continuous operation. Sarah stood and began pacing around the creature, her engineer's mind cataloging the damage. The worst wounds were along its right side, where something had torn through scales and muscle to reach vital organs. One wing was barely attached, held in place by scar tissue and sheer stubborn biology. Burns covered nearly a quarter of its body. I need to access its central nervous system, Sarah announced. The nanobots are integrated with its brain functions. If I can reprogram them, I might be able to stabilize its condition long enough to work on the physical injuries. Sarah, you're talking about performing brain surgery on an alien creature we know nothing about, Martinez protested. What if you kill it? What if you wake it up and it kills us? Sarah paused in her examination, considering the risks. Martinez was right, this was dangerous beyond anything she'd attempted before. But as she looked at the dragon's peaceful face, she felt something she couldn't quite explain. A connection. A certainty that this creature wasn't evil or dangerous, despite its fearsome appearance. It's a predator, she said quietly. That much is obvious. But look at the craftsmanship in its body. The way its scales are arranged for both protection and flexibility. The proportions of its wings to body mass. This isn't some mindless monster, this is an intelligent being. She knelt again, placing her hand on the dragon's forehead. The scales there were smaller, more delicate. Through her scanner, she could see the complex neural pathways beneath. Someone tried to enslave it, Sarah continued. Used technology to control its mind and body. But it fought back, somehow. These wounds aren't just from weapons, they're from it tearing free of whatever held it. The conviction in her voice was growing stronger. I'm going to give it back its freedom. Over the next 12 hours, Sarah worked with a precision that amazed her crew. Using microsurgical tools designed for repairing quantum processors, she carefully accessed the dragon's neural system. The nanobots were more sophisticated than anything in humanity's current technology. But the basic principles were familiar. They're not just keeping it alive, she realized as she traced the nanobotic networks. They're suppressing its natural abilities. Look at these pathways, they're blocking neural connections to what must be its energy generation organs. Energy generation? Jenkins asked. Sarah highlighted a series of readings on her display. Dragons in human mythology breathe fire. This one appears to have organs capable of generating and projecting intense energy fields. The nanobots have been keeping them shut down. As she worked to reprogram the nanobotic systems, Sarah began to understand more about the dragon's physiology. Its massive size wasn't just for intimidation, it needed that body mass to contain the biological reactors that powered its energy projection abilities. The wings weren't just for flight. They contained sophisticated energy collectors that could absorb power from stars or electromagnetic fields. This isn't just an alien animal, Sarah whispered in awe. This is a living weapon, a biological starship, but as she delved deeper into the nanobotic programming, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. The control systems weren't just suppressing the dragon's abilities, they were designed to turn it into a slave soldier. Neural pathways had been artificially created to force obedience to specific command frequencies. Whoever had done this hadn't just captured the dragon. They'd tried to break its mind. Sarah's jaw tightened with determination. She'd seen enough slavery in human history to recognize it in any form. No intelligent being deserved this fate. Working through the night, she carefully dismantled the control systems while preserving the medical nanobots that were keeping the dragon alive. It was delicate work, one wrong command and she could cause irreparable brain damage or trigger the creature's awakening before she was ready. Martinez brought her coffee and watched her work. Why are you doing this, Sarah? Really? We could hand this over to the science division and go back to mining asteroids. Sarah didn't look up from her neural interface. Because it's the right thing to do. And because... She paused, struggling to put her feelings into words. Because I think humanity needs to prove something. Every species we've met in space has been either peaceful or hostile. We've never had the chance to show what we're really capable of when it comes to helping someone who can't help themselves. As the hours passed, the dragon's condition began to stabilize. The medical nanobots, freed from their control programming, started working more efficiently. Bioreadings showed improved brain activity and organ function. Most importantly, Sarah could see the dragon's natural healing processes beginning to activate for the first time in 2 millennia. It's working, she announced as dawn broke over the mining platform. The nanobots are focusing on healing instead of control. But now comes the hard part. She moved to the dragon's wounded side, where the most severe injuries remained. The damage was extensive, but Sarah had dealt with similar trauma in space accidents. The principles of emergency medicine were universal, even if the anatomy was alien. Using medical fabricators designed for human surgery, she began the painstaking process of repairing torn tissue and damaged organs. The dragon's biology was remarkably resilient. Its cells showed an amazing capacity for regeneration once given the proper support. The wing was the biggest challenge. Sarah had to essentially rebuild the connection between bone and muscle, while ensuring the delicate flight membranes would heal properly. She worked for hours, using her engineering background to understand the mechanical stresses the wing would need to handle. "Sarah," Jenkins called out suddenly. "Its brain activity is spiking." Sarah looked up from her surgical work to see the dragon's massive head beginning to move slightly. Its eyes remained closed, but she could see rapid movement beneath the eyelids. "It's dreaming," she realized. The nanobots are allowing its mind to function normally for the first time in 2,000 years. As if responding to her voice, the dragon's breathing deepened. A low, rumbling sound emerged from its throat, not quite a growl, but something that spoke of vast intelligence stirring to wakefulness. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of sedating the dragon further, she began the final phase of her work, completely removing the control nanobots from its system. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Martinez asked, alarm in his voice. "Setting it free," she replied, her fingers flying over the neural interface controls. All the way free. As the last of the control systems shut down, the dragon's eyes suddenly opened. They were vast and golden, filled with an intelligence that was unmistakably ancient and profound. They fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a long moment, human and dragon stared at each other across an impossible gulf of evolution and experience. Sarah saw no hostility in those magnificent eyes, only confusion, wariness, and gradually, something that might have been gratitude. The dragon tried to move, then stopped as pain shot through its injured body. It looked down at its wounds, then back at Sarah, who was still standing beside its head with her hands on the neural interface. Very slowly, Sarah stepped back and raised her hands, showing she was no longer connected to its systems. The gesture was universal. She was no threat. The dragon's massive head lowered slightly in what might have been acknowledgement. Then it closed its eyes and settled back into rest. But Sarah could see the difference in its posture. This wasn't the helpless unconsciousness of before. This was choice. The dragon was choosing to rest while it healed, trusting these strange small beings who had found it floating in the dark and given it back its freedom. 3 days later, the dragon was strong enough to speak. Sarah had been running diagnostics on the life support systems when she heard it, not words exactly, but a deep, resonant sound that seemed to carry meaning directly into her mind. She looked up to find the dragon watching her with those ancient golden eyes, its massive head raised alertly. Did you just try to communicate with me?" Sarah asked aloud, feeling slightly foolish. The dragon's response came not as sound, but as images and emotions projected directly into her consciousness. She saw herself through the dragon's eyes, a small, determined figure working tirelessly to heal wounds that others had inflicted with malicious intent. She felt the creature's confusion at finding kindness where it had expected cruelty. Sarah staggered under the weight of the mental contact, but forced herself to remain calm. "I can understand you," she said. "Sort of. My name is Sarah. Sarah Chen." More images flooded her mind. Vast star fields, worlds she'd never seen, and then darker visions of massive ship formations, creatures in power armor pursuing something through space. The dragon was showing her its memories. "You're Karathen," Sarah breathed, somehow knowing the dragon's name from the mental exchange. "And you've been running from something for a very long time." The dragon Karathen settled more comfortably in the cargo bay, careful not to damage the human equipment around him. His mental voice was ancient and weary, carrying the weight of millennia. Through their growing connection, Sarah began to understand Karathen's story. He was the last of his kind, a species that had evolved to travel between stars using their own biological energy systems. They had been explorers and guardians, protecting younger civilizations from threats too large for them to handle alone. But 2,000 years ago, they had encountered something that even they couldn't stand against, a machine intelligence that had consumed entire star systems, converting all biological matter into components for its ever-expanding fleet. Karathen's people had fought bravely, but they had been overwhelmed. "The Harvesters," Sarah whispered, the name coming to her through their link. "They took your people." Karathen's mental nod was heavy with grief. He showed her the final battle, how his kin had sacrificed themselves to give him a chance to escape and warn other civilizations. But the Harvesters had caught him before he could reach safety, installing their control nanobots and attempting to add him to their fleet as a biological weapon. "But you broke free," Sarah said, pride filling her voice. "You fought them even when they had control of your mind." The images shifted, showing Karathen's desperate struggle against the nanobotic programming. It had taken him decades to break enough of their control to escape, and by then he was mortally wounded. He had intended to die in space rather than serve as a slave, but the medical nanobots had kept him alive in hibernation. For 2,000 years you've been drifting, Sarah realized. Waiting. Waiting for what? She wondered. But Carathan's answer surprised her. He showed her images of various alien civilizations he had observed during his long journey: peaceful traders, aggressive warriors, advanced scientists. None had shown the particular combination of curiosity, determination, and compassion that he had been searching for. Until now. You were waiting for us, Sarah breathed. For humans. Carathan's mental voice carried something that might have been amusement. Humans were young, barely having reached the stars, but they possessed something that older civilizations often lost: the willingness to help strangers without expecting reward, the ability to see past surface differences to the intelligence beneath. The harvesters, Sarah said, her engineer's mind already working on the implications. Are they still out there? Carathan's response was grim. The machine intelligence was patient, methodical. It would continue expanding, consuming system after system, until it had processed all biological life in the galaxy. And according to his calculations, it would reach human space within the next 50 years. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but also something else: excitement. This was why Carathan had been searching, not for a species advanced enough to fight the harvesters alone, but for one creative enough to find a solution that others had missed. What do you need from us? Sarah asked. The answer came in a flood of technical specifications and biological diagrams that made Sarah's head spin. Carathan's species had been powerful, but they had fought the harvesters using conventional tactics: force against force, energy against energy. They had lost because they had played by the machine's rules. Humans, Carathan believed, would approach the problem differently. They were tool users, problem solvers, adapters. They had survived on a hostile world by learning to work together and think creatively. And most importantly, they had shown that they could look at a wounded enemy and choose healing over revenge. You want to work with us? Sarah realized. A partnership. Carathan's massive head moved in what was unmistakably a nod. He could provide the technology and knowledge accumulated by his people over millions of years. Humans could provide the fresh perspective and innovative thinking that might find a weakness in the harvester fleet. But first, he needed to heal completely. The injuries inflicted 2 millennia ago were finally closing, but his energy projection organs required careful calibration to function properly. Sarah's engineering expertise had saved his life, but now he needed her to help him reach his full potential. Over the following weeks, Sarah worked with Carathan to restore his biological systems to peak efficiency. It was like nothing she had ever experienced: part medical procedure, part engineering project, part collaboration with a living spacecraft. Carathan's body contained technologies that human science couldn't duplicate, but Sarah's innovative approaches to problem-solving impressed even the ancient dragon. When Terra Command finally arrived to investigate the anomalous readings from asteroid TX-7749, they found Sarah's mining crew working alongside a fully restored star dragon. The sight of the magnificent creature floating gracefully around the mining platform, energy crackling along his wings as he tested his renewed abilities, left the command team speechless. This is impossible. Admiral Torres breathed as she watched Carathan demonstrate his energy projection capabilities by carving precise patterns into a nearby asteroid. We're not advanced enough for first contact with something like this. Sarah smiled as she floated beside Carathan's massive head, one hand resting on his scales. That's exactly what makes us perfect for it, Admiral. We're not advanced enough to be set in our ways. The formal first contact protocols were a disaster. As Sarah had expected, the diplomatic team kept trying to establish humanity's position in some galactic hierarchy, while the scientists wanted to study Carathan like a specimen. But Carathan had already chosen his human partners, Sarah and her crew, who had seen him as a person in need of help rather than a resource to be exploited. When Carathan shared his warnings about the approaching harvester fleet, the reaction was predictable. Some officials wanted to hide and hope the machines would pass humanity by. Others insisted on building massive defensive fleets using conventional weapons. A few even suggested surrendering preemptively to avoid a hopeless fight. Sarah listened to the debates with growing frustration. These people were thinking like the civilizations that had already fallen to the harvesters. They were seeing the problem in terms of military might and political maneuvering. "You're all missing the point," Sarah finally announced during one particularly heated planning session. "The harvesters aren't just a military threat, they're an engineering problem. And humans are really good at solving engineering problems that everyone else says are impossible." She activated the holographic display, showing the technical data Carathen had shared about the harvester fleet structure. "Look at this. They're machines, which means they follow logical patterns. They have weaknesses, we just need to think creatively enough to exploit them." Admiral Torres frowned at the display. "Engineer Chen, with respect, this is a military matter now. You've done excellent work, but, Admiral," Carathen's mental voice interrupted, reaching every person in the room simultaneously. "The human you address has already accomplished what my people thought impossible. She restored my freedom when your greatest medical facilities could not. Perhaps you should listen to her solutions." The room fell silent as everyone processed the unprecedented experience of direct mental communication with an alien intelligence. Sarah used the moment to her advantage. "Carathen isn't just offering to fight alongside us," she explained. "He's offering to teach us. His people's technology, combined with human innovation, could create something the harvesters have never encountered before." She gestured to her crew, who had been working with Carathen for weeks now. "We've already started developing hybrid technologies, biological systems guided by human engineering principles. The harvesters expect resistance based on their previous encounters. They don't expect evolution." As Sarah outlined her preliminary ideas, she could see the shift in the room. The military officials stopped thinking about conventional warfare. The scientists started considering possibilities they had never imagined, and the politicians began to realize that humanity had just gained something no amount of diplomacy could have achieved: a powerful ally who had chosen them freely. Months later, as construction began on the first human-dragon hybrid vessels, Sarah often found herself standing with Carathen on the observation deck of Terra Station. The great dragon had adapted surprisingly well to human society, though he preferred the vast spaces of the station's central hub to the cramped corridors designed for smaller beings. "Do you think it will work?" Sarah asked, watching the construction crews install biomechanical hybrid systems on the prototype ships. "Your technology? Our creativity?" Carathen's mental response was warm with satisfaction. "Your people have already surprised me many times, Sarah Chen. The harvesters calculate based on past encounters, but they have never encountered humanity before, and they have certainly never encountered humanity guided by dragon wisdom." He paused, his massive head turning to look at her directly. "But more importantly, they have never encountered the kind of partnership that we have forged. They know conquest and consumption, but they do not understand cooperation between species that choose to trust each other." Sarah smiled, placing her hand on his scales as she had that first day when she had chosen to heal rather than fear. "Then let's teach them." In the distance, the hybrid ships were taking shape: sleek vessels that combined human engineering with dragon biology, crewed by teams trained to work with their ship's living systems rather than simply operating dead machinery. It was a new kind of fleet for a new kind of war, one where the greatest weapon would be the bonds of understanding between species willing to stand together against the dark. Carathen had waited 2,000 years to find allies worthy of his trust. Humanity had spent their entire history preparing to prove that even the impossible could be fixed with enough determination and the right tools. The harvesters were about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met the immovable human spirit to never give up on someone who needed help.